suppose the first thing I should do is tell you about myself, and then I'll go on and explain about the work we're doing in Coiste. I was born in 1958. The first 4 years of my life grew up on the Woodstock Road in East Belfast, and then my family moved to West Belfast, a street called Isidore Avenue. I went to primary school in a school called St Gall's, which if anyone knows Clonard Monastery, it used to be just right behind Clonard Monastery. The school was situated, two streets meet at a right angle, Waterville Street and Bombay Street, and St Gall's School was situated right at the right angle there. So, right next to St Gall's School would have been, at a later stage, the Peace Wall that runs between the Falls and Shankill areas. So the school, primary school, was situated very much in their face area. This was in the 60s, of course, before the troubles really erupted. So my first introduction to the conflict, and by the way, the street that we lived in, we were the third Catholic family to have moved into it, and the other two Catholic families were retired RUC men, which was unusual in itself, to have Catholics in the RUC. So the two of them lived in our street. I suppose my first introduction to the conflict began in 1969, just done the 11 plus, and had been accepted into St Malachy's College. But we were on holiday in Ballycastle at the time, and the reports were coming through about the outbreak of disturbances, particularly in Belfast. And even at that age, it was possible to discern the worry among the adults, talking in hushed terms and stuff like that. And it was decided that we would stay, when the holiday ended, that we would stay with relatives up around there in Ballycastle, and my parents went on home. But later on, when we did go home, we used to go to Mass in Clonard Monastery, and my father took us down to see Bombay Street, and it had been burnt to the ground by loyalists, and who had been led in at that time by the RUC and the B Specials. So that was really my first introduction to the political conflict. A couple of years after that, all my friends in the area that I lived in were Protestants. But as the troubles went on, they seemed to distance themselves, the vast majority of them anyway. And it culminated one time in a bit of a row in the street, and a crowd of kids arrived at the house. And my mother went out, spoke specifically to one of them and said, I'm not mentioning his name, "You lived your life in our house." And he said, "That was before you turned it into an IRA stronghold." So the sort of alienation between myself and the friends that I had run about with was almost complete. There was still some that, where we retained a relationship, but by and large, there had been a serious estrangement there. So, and this culminated then in an incident in around, I think it was 1972, but I'm not completely sure about it. Someone arrived at my house, I was 14 or 15 at the time, to shoot me. It was loyalists. I wasn't in the house at the time, but they had asked for me by name and fired shots into the house. And the result was that we had to up and leave our house the very next day. And we then moved into, my grandmother lived on Falls Road, so we moved in with her for a few months until we got our own house. Not long after that, I joined n-Iarchimí, which was the youth wing of the IRA. And when I was 17, I joined the IRA itself. I was involved in numerous operations against the British Army and against the RUC. I was also involved in the economic bombing campaign of Belfast city centre. I was arrested in 1978 and charged with causing an explosion in the city centre and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. And I mean, I think it's important also to say that on the same day that I was sentenced, there was a loyalist sentenced by the same judge. The two of us had been put back for sentencing after our trials finished. He was a man in his 30s and he had been charged with attempted murder. They had gone to shoot a prison warder and shot through the door and seriously injured his wife, and he had driven the car in that incident. He was sentenced to 8 years and I was sentenced to 15 years, in spite of no one having been injured in the operation that I had been involved in. So at that time the blanket protest was in full swing. I then joined the protest and I was on it up until it ended. I had been involved we had a hunger strike in 1980. 7 men had begun the hunger strike simultaneously, and when the hunger strike was coming to its most crucial point, when some of the men were becoming seriously ill, 28 of us also joined. So I was on the hunger strike for 5 days at the end of that hunger strike in 1981. And when the British reneged on the commitments they had given to the hunger strikers, Bobby Sands decided that he would have another hunger strike, and again asked for volunteers, and I again put my own name forward. And to be honest, I didn't expect to be on it, but as it turned out, the hunger strike went on longer than I had expected it to, and I eventually replaced Kieran Doherty on the 10th of August 1981. He had died earlier at the start of August. And I was on hunger strike then up until the 3rd of October 1981, when the hunger strike was ended. At that stage I had been 55 days on hunger strike. I was very seriously ill. I was almost totally blind. I weighed about 7 stone. I was totally jaundiced. I had been told the 3rd of October was a Saturday. I had been told by a consultant from the city hospital that on the Wednesday, that because my liver was beginning to shut down, that he couldn't guarantee I would survive even if I ended my hunger strike there and then. But as you can see, I did survive. I was eventually released in 1987. I rejoined the IRA when I was released and was rearrested again in 1989, charged with attempting to kill members of the Crown Forces, and was sentenced to 24 years imprisonment. I was then released in 1988 as part of the Good Friday Agreement. Had it not been for the Good Friday Agreement, I would only have been released last year. And since then, I have been involved politically with Sinn Féin, and more recently, just at the start of June, I took up the job as Legacy Coordinator for Coiste n-Iarchimí. That's the umbrella group that represents Republican ex-prisoners. And I explained briefly earlier what our role is. It's to provide support and welfare for former political prisoners and their families. It's to campaign to end discrimination against prisoners in terms of travel restrictions, employment, provision of goods and services. For example, most people don't know that former prisoners cannot get home insurance. So what happens is that either ex-political prisoners don't insure their houses, or they do insure them and tell a lie on the application form, which leaves them open for fraud and their policies being void if it's discovered when they make a claim that they have a conviction. So there are issues like that, issues in terms of travel to the States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada,